members of the U.S. Border Protection with us today who are going to speak to that topic. Fentanyl seizures in particular at our border have increased 1,000% year over year. One, that's a statement that U.S. Protection and United States Customs and Border Protection are doing a great job, but it also shows you the stress that you're under day in and day out, and the importance of funding the United States Customs and Border Protection Agency. It also speaks to the work that's being done here in Racine County by our sheriff and by our deputies, as well as local law enforcement agencies, and the need to make sure that they have the resources that are needed to be able to protect all of us living here in the state of Wisconsin from fentanyl. We're going to talk about also what this drug is and what it looks like. I don't think everybody fully appreciates what a small amount of fentanyl can do in a lifetime. We have a sign behind us just showing what 2 milligrams of fentanyl is that size compared to a penny. And that amount of fentanyl is sufficient to kill a person. When you look at that, you realize why an individual who engages in illegal drugs could easily have that drug laced with fentanyl and find themselves yet another person who dies from a fentanyl overdose. In front of us in Congress is a big decision that's coming ahead, and that is whether or not fentanyl-related substances should be a Schedule I drug. I believe fentanyl-related substances must be a Schedule I drug, and that Congress needs to act. We need to act to protect the lives of Americans who are at risk from fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances. The current schedule originally expired on February 18th. Congress kicked the can down the road, and this now expires on March 11th. So in the next 4 weeks, we have a major decision point in the United States of America. If we're going to support the men and women of law enforcement, protect members of our community, and to do that, we need to schedule fentanyl-related substances as a Schedule I drug. I want to now dive, if I can, right in to allow each one of our panelists to introduce themselves, offer some opening remarks, and then we'll lead a little bit of a Q&A discussion. I know we have some tight schedules. Some people then will have to depart, and then we're going to open it up to some questions from our friends in the media as well. So if I can, I'd like to start today with our Racine County Sheriff, Sheriff Schmaling.
Thank you, Congressman Steil. It is a privilege to be here today, and I want to say thank you for your leadership. This has been a phenomenal experience working with you. This is not our first roundtable experience with you in your mission to defend Wisconsinites and protect us, so thank you for your hard work. I also want to thank the leadership in this room as well. Everyone at this table has something here to offer today and offer their different perspectives as we can imagine. And also the law enforcement that is in this room today. Aside from this conversation about fentanyl and opioids in our community, in our state, and around our country, I just want to say thank you to law enforcement officers. The challenging work that each and every one of you face every day is beyond belief, and I want to say thank you on behalf of everyone at the Racine Sheriff's Office. You're doing a phenomenal job. I also want to begin a little bit with my perspective, a little bit of a briefing, if you will. 27 years ago, I put this uniform on, and I was assigned to the Racine County Metro Drug Unit as undercover drug agent. For the first time in my life, I was 23 years old, I was brand new to this community. I was tasked with going out and buying drugs. The first night I went out, the very first night I went out, ladies and gentlemen, I bought powder cocaine and a variety of other drugs. To say the least, I was shocked, I was nervous, and naturally very scared. But that year went on, and I got further involved and entrenched in this drug culture, and I was literally socializing and hanging out with addicts and drug dealers alike. One thing I've noticed with the addicts is that they didn't work. The vast majority did not work. They supported their habit by stealing. They were stealing from our homes when we were busy at work, stealing from our cars when we left them unlocked, or they're engaging in retail theft. Just any way to steal things, sell it for pennies on the dollar to support their number one cause in life, and that was their habit, this addiction that they had. And then we had the drug dealers, which is an interesting breed. And I can tell you, going face to face with drug dealers, buying their drugs, they did not care whether I lived or died, or you live or die. They don't see a human being with a heartbeat, but they see as a dollar sign. And it's really, really disheartening when we look back at that. So when we look at this conversation and fast forward to today, we're talking about a lot of different things. And these conversations have been going on for decades in my field. But today is very, very important. And look at the opioid epidemic, and this county has taken sort of, at least the Sheriff's Office, is taking a four-pronged approach to it. And I'll talk a little bit about those. The number one approach we've taken is life-saving. naturally, first and foremost, is saving lives, is it not? And so back in 2014, the state of Wisconsin, up until 2014 rather, the only way you could administer Narcan was through a certified medical professional, oftentimes in the back of an ambulance, and oftentimes it was just too late. We lobbied hard in Madison to have that law changed, to be able to put Narcan in the first responders' hands, men and women who put a badge on every day, and including our county jail. And right away, we started saving lives. We implemented that right away, and I'm proud to say Racine County was the first law enforcement agency in the state of Wisconsin to put Narcan into all of our squads, including our jail. But going on, we ended up saving, I should say, we have 68 deployments to date of Narcan throughout the county as first responders. And I'm proud to say many of those 68 are alive today. So that is something we should all be proud of. The second prong approach is education. I know the county executive and I, and the district attorney who's appearing virtually today, have been part of a number of discussions about opioid summits in our county. What does that summit mean? We bring together community stakeholders, and everyone offered their perspective and offered the community a chance to be able to understand what opioids are, what fentanyl is, and how dangerous it is. And our target zone was the middle schoolers and high schoolers along with their parents. And I'm proud to say we would fill high school auditoriums. There was a thirst in our community to learn more about this dangerous poison and what we were going to do about it as law enforcement and as a community. The third piece is enforcement. Naturally, that is what we do in law enforcement, is enforce. Sergeant Dobish is here. He heads up my Metro Drug Unit. And if he was to tell you today, and I would agree with him, that we will not be able to arrest our way out of this problem. And that's one of the reasons why we're here today. And I commend the Congressman for bringing this forward to talk about solutions and how can we solve these issues and make Wisconsinites safer. And fourth, and a final comment before I pass to Juan, is talking about the prosecution. There's a drug court, and I'll leave our district attorney to talk more in depth about this. This is her area of expertise. Racine County does have a drug court, and we should all be very proud of that. I have no interest as the sheriff. I run the county jail here. We have an 876-bed facility. I have no interest in having addicts in my jail. They belong in a treatment facility where they can get the much-needed help that they deserve and maybe even save their own life. But I do have plenty of room in my jail for drug dealers. These are individuals who are bent on putting this dangerous poison into the hands of oftentimes our most vulnerable, our children, all for a profit. And also, last piece I'd like to talk about is Len bias cases. You know, we had approximately 65 overdoses last year. Some of them are, in fact, the vast majority of them are fentanyl-related. There's a number of them that we're still waiting on toxicology tests because it takes approximately 3 months to get those results back. But at the end of the day, those are 68 accidental deaths, like we like to call them. At the end of the day, they are truly homicides, in my opinion. Have we been able to find and locate the individual who gave that individual the dangerous drug and caused their death, they should be prosecuted under the Len bias law. And again, I'll let their district attorney talk more about that. And I'll end with this, is that Racine County Sheriff's Office is deeply committed, and we will always be committed to working very closely with our county executive, members of our county board, to find funding sources so that we can effectively investigate and hold accountable drug dealers who are insistent on putting this poison into individual communities. In addition to that is finding resources and funding to be able to educate and get into the schools, get into the middle schools, the high schools, to educate our community members about the dangers of this drug. So with that said, I want to thank everyone for being here today. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our county executive, Jonathan Delagrave.
If I can, let me just jump in, because I want to just make sure we hear a point, because I think this is really powerful. There were 68 drug overdose deaths last year in Racine County alone. Correct.
That is correct. It was 68 drug overdoses relating to fentanyl last year alone. That number is up 20% from the year prior, which is 2020, and that number is up 40% from 2019. So we are seeing a 20% increase each year. And I can tell you from the start of this year, we've already had 5 overdose deaths in January. Now the toxicology is not back on those particular deaths last month. 5 overdose deaths last month alone. I strongly suspect, and there's indicators that will probably be fentanyl related as well.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna shift the order if I can, because I think what's important, we're gonna come through all of our speakers. This is a topic that requires local law enforcement, our local sheriff's department, our local law enforcement agencies, our county executives, but also requires the federal government, because many of these fentanyl drugs are coming in across our borders. And I'm so excited that we have with us from the United States Customs and Border Protection, Director of Field Operations, LaFonda Sutton-Burke. LaFonda?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Congressman Steil.
There you go.
Thank you for the invitation, Congressman Steil, to participate in this critical roundtable to discuss the illicit flow of opioids into the United States. Again, my name is LaFonda Sutton-Burke. I'm the Director of Field Operations for the Chicago Field Office of U.S. Customs and Border Protection within U.S. Customs and Border Protection within the Office of Field Operations. In this capacity, I oversee the 28 ports of entry throughout 12 Midwestern states, which includes Wisconsin, the ports of Racine, Milwaukee, and Green Bay. CBP's efforts to combat the flow of illicit drugs are guided by a rigorous strategy and implemented through a multifaceted approach to include collaboration and enhanced intelligence sharing with other agencies and foreign partners, specialized training programs, and emerging technology designed to detect illicit goods entering the United States via air, land, and sea ports of entry. We're guided by 4 strategic goals that focus on ensuring CBP can act aggressively to combat these illicit opioids and quickly adapt to the changing tactics of manufacturers of these illicit drugs, as well as cartels, traffickers, smugglers, and their networks. Goal 1 is to enhance collaboration and information sharing. Goal 2 is to produce actionable intelligence on illicit opioids. Goal 3 is to target the opioid supply chains. And Goal 4 is to protect CBP personnel from exposure to these dangerous opioids. Ultimately, our success relies on specialized skills, vigilance, and the dedication of our officers, agents, and our scientists and other support personnel that work tirelessly to keep these dangerous and lethal drugs out of our country. On a typical day, CBP seizes over 5,000 pounds of drugs. That's daily. Otherwise, that may make it into our American communities. Our agency seizes a high amount of methamphetamines, marijuana, heroin, and cocaine. However, recently we have seen an increase in fentanyl, a synthetic opioid analgesic that is 80 to 100 times more potent than morphine, which often results in overdoses in our communities. And most of the fentanyl does enter through the southwest border in privately owned vehicles, commercial vehicles, and at times even with pedestrians. Although less frequently, fentanyl also enters through the international mail facilities and express consignment facilities. And in my area of responsibility here in the Chicago field office, last year we had 68 seizures with a total weight of 176 pounds. This represents a 26% increase from the previous fiscal year, and FY22 to date, we've had 23 seizures containing over 213 pounds. Last year, nationwide, CBP seized over 11,000 pounds of fentanyl, which was a 135% increase from the previous fiscal year. So again, I appreciate being offered the ability to participate in this roundtable.
Director, really appreciate your comments. I think, again, to conceptualize, we're talking 11,000 pounds of fentanyl, and 2 milligrams is a lethal dose. Why this is such a significant problem: 64,000 deaths across the United States of America, 68 of those occurring just in Racine County. 68 people died from drug overdoses related to fentanyl just in Racine County. 64,000 individuals overdosed on drugs across the United States of America last year. This is an absolute crisis that demands our attention. And I really appreciate your words, and I think in particular what we're seeing, the work that you and others in your agency are doing day in and day out. We applaud it, because you are on the front lines. I know you have 2 of your colleagues here, but you represent thousands of people that are every day the United States Customs and Border Protection that are working to keep our country safe. And I have personally been to the US-Mexico border multiple times. I've spoken to many of your colleagues about the challenges that they face, about the lack of funding right now, about the inability to begin or restart construction of the border wall and how that would be helpful, in particular as it relates to the drugs, where drug smugglers are utilizing, my experience in speaking with your colleagues, drug smugglers are utilizing the human element of this. They're involved, many of these criminal gangs are involved in trafficking large numbers of humans across, and at the same time, utilizing the chaos that's created by that to bring forward the drug side, because there's only so many men and women of U.S. Customs and Border Patrol available. We're currently understaffed. I think it's imperative that we make sure that we're providing funding for our border protection, and in particular that we're working to secure the border, and to me that involves finishing the wall. Appreciate your comments and the work that you all do. Let me shift gears now. We have appearing with us virtually today, we have Racine County District Attorney Trisha Hanson, who's also been on the front lines of prosecuting some of these cases here in Racine. Trisha? We're going to test hold on, District Attorney Hanson, give me one moment. Let's see if we can get the sound up.
I think it's me.
Nope, you're good.
My end. Are we good now?
Go right ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Congressman Steil, for putting this group together today to talk about particularly that issue of Congress needing to take action and to take action quickly. Those of us who are down here finding the fentanyl, prosecuting the fentanyl, getting these dealers off the streets, know and are aware of how critical that law is going to be for our process. Okay, is that better?
You're good.
Okay. I will tell you that in February of 2018, when the executive order came, adding that emergency order to make fentanyl a part of Schedule 1 in terms of the FDA's rating for drugs, we were very pleased because of the amount of fentanyl that we were seeing even here in Racine, Wisconsin. You mentioned tiny amounts of fentanyl being lethal, but there are so many different kinds of fentanyl. Carfentanil is an analgesic that they use on elephants. And so a grain of carfentanil will kill a human being. So when the law came, when the emergency order came, it covered all of the fentanyls. And that's super critical for us in the sense that China is willing to sell the components of fentanyl to anyone who's willing to buy it. And that formula, that recipe for fentanyl changes all the time. So if we were to define something by what's on the street today, there'll be something new on the street by tomorrow. So that legislation is going to be critical for those of us who are prosecuting these cases. I think in all my years, the fastest I've ever seen the Wisconsin legislature move to create a law banning a substance was on fentanyl. And I was grateful and appreciative then because this, out of all the drugs I've seen in my career, is by far the most deadly. I do a lot of work. I personally work on our treatment court teams. We have a veterans court team as well as a drug treatment court team. And what we're finding and what is most common is that people don't know they're buying fentanyl. So even if you are someone, say, who lives out in Oregon and your goal is to legalize drugs, people who are using drugs have no idea that they are getting fentanyl. Young people, high school and college age, are buying ecstasy pills off the street. And now that you can buy a press to make pills on Amazon, they are buying pills that they think look like ecstasy, but they're not. They're combinations of methamphetamine, combinations of fentanyl, and a pill that young person may have tried before is now going to be fatal for them. When I started this job, inositol, which is a pretty inert substance, baby formula, that's what drug dealers used to mix with their cocaine on the street. So when you ingested it, it didn't have an impact on you. Fentanyl, methamphetamine is so cheap right now. Think about it this way. Heroin comes from a plant. So we have to wait for that plant to grow. And you have to have things like rain and the right sunshine and the right temperature. And so it's a very fragile sort of crop versus the synthetic fentanyl, the synthetic opiates that they can make by the truckload because it's just chemicals being put together to have the same effect. So if fentanyl does not, and all the analogs of it do not become a permanent Schedule I substance, I think that the crisis in the United States with fentanyl will only get worse. That's taking away one of the most important tools in our prosecution toolbox right now. It's cheap, it's a good filler, and it brings you back because the high is so unbelievable. So at this point, while I always say that generally speaking, I have all the laws I need, it's resources. In this case, if this is not adopted as law by Congress, you are going to see an increase in the number of deaths from fentanyl, particularly from people who don't even know they're taking it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments, District Attorney Hanson. I'll let you pull your mic back. That is really helpful, the information you shared. Let me shift, and we're going to talk a little bit on the local health side. I'm so excited that we have our Racine County Executive, Jonathan Delagrave. Jonathan?
Thanks, Congressman Steil. Fentanyl absolutely has to remain a Schedule I drug. It is a scourge and a blemish on our communities and our county. Good afternoon, my name is Jonathan Delagrave. I'm the Racine County Executive. Just want to also thank Congressman Steil, the Sheriff, and our DA for being here and just talking about the challenges that they face on a daily basis. The Sheriff kind of talked about just what we're facing. I can just tell you right now in our county we have 167 people who have an opioid addiction that we're treating right now in Racine County. That's up from 2 years ago. We mentioned the over 60 deaths. If you extract that out already in 2022, we're going to be way past that. So with that in mind, I would just like, for my emphasis, to say that I'm proud that Racine County led the way for an opioid settlement. We're going to receive $10 million, or just shy of $10 million, and we're going to use those resources to work with law enforcement agencies like this in the room, our sheriff and our DA. Yes, we're going to treat those who are addicted, but we're going to use those resources again to work with all law enforcement agencies to get those who are manufacturing and dealing, especially fentanyl, into what the district attorney says. I personally have been affected by a close family member buying something that they didn't know what was in it, and they died. So this is also personal for me, but I'm glad that we led the fight, and I look forward to using the resources to make sure that we can stop this as best we can from infiltrating Racine County. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you very much. Let's jump now to another federal partner with the North Central High Intensity Drug Trafficking area. I'm very excited that we have Deputy Director Scott Albrecht with us. Scott.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you, esteemed members of the panel, ladies and gentlemen of the media. It's a pleasure being here today, and again, thanks for letting HIDTA be a part of this important topic. I can echo, especially the Sheriff and I think came on the law enforcement job about the same time. For the last 30 years, I've worked in drug law enforcement. The last 7 months, I've had the pleasure to be the Deputy Director of the North Central HIDTA. We, part of HIDTA and part of my career, have never seen a drug this potent and this potent or this dangerous. The North Central HIDTA, the North Central High Intensity Drug Trafficking area, is one of 33 HIDTAs around the country and falls under the President's Office of National Drug Control Policy, ONDCP. Here in the North Central HIDTA, we have a bit of a unique perspective because we see what's going on in Minnesota as well as Wisconsin. Focusing on here in Wisconsin, we fund, coordinate, and oversee 12 drug task forces, but also fund, oversee, and collaborate with initiatives related to training and drug prevention. As part of North Central HIDTA's mission, we take care of every year a threat assessment that is used by not only law enforcement in this area of responsibility, but also ONDCP in its funding every year. And that threat assessment for the last 2 to 3 years has focused almost primarily on synthetic opioids and fentanyl-related substances specifically. And that is due to the overdoses, due to the ready availability, and as many members of the panel have already stated, people just do not know what they're ingesting these days. Around the state of Wisconsin, our drug units, which are from Brown County to Eau Claire and many in southeastern Wisconsin, see fentanyl on a daily basis. They see it within cocaine, somewhat within marijuana, mainly within cocaine, mainly when they believe they're working a heroin case. It is 100% fentanyl for a number of reasons. It's cheaper, it's more available these days, and it's somewhat of a marketing tool by the traffickers. Fentanyl just goes that much further than organically grown heroin. The threat assessment takes into account activity around the state from our healthcare partners as well as our drug enforcement partners, other than the northern half of the state where methamphetamine has emerged as the #1 threat. Fentanyl is the #1 threat in all portions of this state. With that said, nothing has taken the place of synthetic opioids, fentanyl specifically, as leading the overdoses that we've seen every day. In finishing my brief introduction here, one thing we're proud of we have in the HIDTA program is a new and robust program called the Overdose Response Strategy, or ORS. This is a program that is two-pronged. It brings the public health side and the public safety side together in two pieces. The public health side through a member of our team that works and is funded by the CDC, the public safety side through a member of our team with the title Drug Intelligence Officer. The two of them work across the aisle, public health, public safety, to track trends, to track current enforcement efforts, and most importantly, put out on the street by way of public health and public safety what the newest threats are. I welcome further questions regarding the ORS or HIDTA as a whole. And again, thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Thank you very much. We've heard kind of the high level. How do we stop this, right? From our national partners, from our local sheriff. I want to also talk to and hear from you, Deputy Ortiz. You're on the patrol. You're on the beat every day. You wake up, you put the badge over your heart, you go out. You don't know the call that you're going to answer. We've already committed to serving and protecting and answering that call for us. For that, we're appreciative of you and all your colleagues that do that every day. But we'd love to hear your perspective of an officer that's going out in our community to keep our community safe, what you're seeing.
Thank you, Congressman Steil. I think I'm Deputy Ortiz with the Racine County Sheriff's Office. I think an important thing that we need to remember that a lot of people have alluded to is that this fentanyl is laced in so many different drugs. And on the ground level, being on a traffic enforcement unit, you have interactions with many members of the community that have these drugs, and you don't know, as well as they don't know, what could be inside of these. It could be something that from a simple traffic stop where there is marijuana, cocaine, heroin, something in there, and the people that have it, as well as you believe that that's all that's going to be in there. But further tests show that fentanyl was laced in this product. It's very calming to know that we have these resources available to us. A lot of things that they can provide us as far as like the testing, the training, things like that, we continue to get provided to us. But still we need to make sure that as deputies on the road and officers responding to these things that we're being safe. And then as far as the Narcan that we're allowed, it's fantastic. I've been able to assist in reviving people that have fallen victim to fentanyl, not knowing what they had. And I think that that speaks volumes to the support that we get from not only the federal government, but our local government as well.
Thank you very much. I now want to open it up a little bit here just to a conversation so we can come away with some ideas and results to what we can do to address this. And in particular, I want to start, Sheriff Schmaling, we've heard the statistics. Over 60 people died of overdose deaths just in Racine. You're seeing this day in and day out. We heard the amount of drugs that are coming across the border every single day that our colleagues here and friends and the Customs and Border Protection are doing for us. I'd love to ask both you, Director, and you, Sheriff Schmaling, if I can. What are you seeing? Can you give me a firsthand example of what you're seeing to kind of conceptualize these drugs coming in?
Absolutely, Congressman Steil. Interesting enough, in preparation for today, I met with Sergeant Dovish from my office, who heads up my drug unit. And again, in preparation, he pointed out that just this morning, our drug agents were out in the field and had made a drug purchase. And I brought that item with me here today. I'm going to hold it up. And it's rather interesting enough. I have a close-up picture of it as well, you folks. And I'm looking at this photo behind Congressman Steil at this penny with the lethal dose. So when we look at this amount, this is a half a gram, folks, that we bought this morning. It's about $60. $60, easy to get, right down the street. Well, when we test this product to make sure we're certain what we bought, right away we thought we were buying heroin. Just like anybody else who is a heroin addict would think they were buying heroin. We have these reagent kits that we test drugs with. So when we put that reagent kit together with the heroin, we recognized it was very weak. It was a very weak test we received from heroin. So we put the product, a portion of that product, into a fentanyl reagent kit, and we received a very, very strong positive reaction. Now, we weren't buying fentanyl, we were buying heroin. And it kind of goes to the surrounding conversations we're having here around this table here today, and others who unfortunately have passed. When they thought they were buying one thing, they were getting something that was extraordinarily deadly. I think that penny photo back there is so impacting. When I look at this is enough to kill, I know it would kill me. I'm certain it would probably kill most of us in this room. This is a dose that we just bought today for a mere $60. So that is a sort of a local impact of things that we're seeing on the street today, and this is what's happening to members of our community. They're buying things, and today it's heroin. There's also marijuana. I know the district attorney mentioned it earlier, and others across the table have talked about heroin is now being laced with this. It makes it that much more deadly for those who are engaging in this type of behavior.
The smugglers are using a variety of concealment techniques to smuggle fentanyl and other drugs across the borders and also in international mail and express consignment environments. They use concealment techniques ranging from placing them in toys, making molds of certain products, and putting in between photo frames, large-scale conveyances, have hidden compartments of narcotics, again, just various concealment techniques and methodologies. And so CBP uses a layered enforcement strategy that ranges from large-scale and small-scale X-ray imaging systems that allows us to facilitate legitimate cargo and traffic coming into the U.S., but also being able to swiftly identify narcotics that may be concealed in various items. We also have the technology that keeps our officers safe, handheld elemental laser devices that allow, they have a spectrometer that uses a laser to look through packages and analyze the substances without an officer actually having to open the package, possibly being exposed to a hazardous substance. And again, the Narcan that everyone is talking about, we have those deployed in all of our facilities and even in our vehicles to ensure that if there is an exposure, that our officers will be safe. We have canine assets that have been responsible for nearly 3/4 of opioids seized last fiscal year, including over 8,400 pounds of fentanyl and over 3,800 pounds of heroin. And so without all of the layers of protection CBP has at its disposal, more of this deadly drug would make it into our communities and homes, wreaking havoc on the American people.
Really, really appreciate those comments. I think it reiterates the need for an investment in our law enforcement. The technology that you're relying on to keep yourself, but also the men and women of the United States border protection safe is critical. And we need to make sure that we're investing in our law enforcement officers, because you truly are the front line of making sure these substances don't even begin to come into the United States. I want to shift gears a little bit because we're hearing about these huge numbers, and the individual that probably had their life saved because they did buy this drug that you took off the streets today. I mean, if that amount can kill an individual, the arrest that your officer made very likely saved the life of somebody else who would have bought that drug today here in Racine County. But I also think about the time and energy that takes, that each arrest takes. That officer is now off the streets, working through the processing, ultimately going through our court system. And we're straining our services, EMS, we're straining our services with our local law enforcement agencies, our police, Customs and Border Protection. And could you, or maybe Mr. Delagrave or yourself, Sheriff Schmaling, comment on what this strain on services does here in our community?
I can certainly talk about, Congressman, the strain on law enforcement, and I'm certain the county exec would like to talk about the other aspects of county government that plays a strong role in this. I can tell you from a law enforcement perspective, we're always looking at ways that we can be proactive. Oftentimes law enforcement is very reactive to everything, as you can imagine. So it's rare when we can do proactive things. And I touched a little bit about my opening comments about the educational component. The strain on law enforcement, Deputy Ortiz hit on a number of things, talking about not knowing what we're walking into each and every day. But when we look at these types of cases where we're making traffic stops, we talk about individuals who shouldn't be driving when they're drinking alcohol. That was a big thing years ago, right? It still is today. But now we have individuals who are engaging in drug driving. We have individuals, we had recently just an individual who shot heroin up at a restaurant here along the interstate, and literally within minutes drove into construction barrels and collapsed over the steering wheel. That call came in as an unresponsive person. Our deputies arrived, detected he was literally turning purple, he was no longer breathing, administered Narcan, and that person was breathing before rescue even arrived, thus saving his life. These are tragic events that occur almost on the daily here in Racine County, but we need people to respond to those. We need training, we need equipment, and we need to make certain that we are supported by our community members, supported by our community partners, our federal government, and so on and so forth. But then we look at the overdose deaths that occur. Look at the amount of resource that occur when there's a death in our community. Why? Because a family wants answers to these questions. Who gave this person this illegal substance? Why is my loved one deceased today? And they demand that an investigation is done. Those are a strain on our resources. We want to be able to give that family justice, but that requires resources and time and thank you.
Thank you.
I would just add really quickly that beyond what the sheriff stated, this also affects our healthcare system. If you have more individuals needing ER visits or more EMT visits, that takes away from potentially other people who are in need, or more so, or even more importantly, it stretches our capacity to give the best services that we possibly can. And that also includes our mental health or our behavioral health system in Racine County. The more this scourge and fentanyl expands in our county, the more our mental health technicians and our mental health services are stretched, and that becomes the quality that we can provide becomes not as great as it should be. So this has a ripple effect beyond what the sheriff and I just mentioned. It's a capacity issue, it's a fiscal issue, just with healthcare premiums for the individual family. Those are going to be indirectly driven up. So this scourge has a wide range of negative effects throughout our county and the people who live in Racine County.
If I could just add just a little bit to this, I forgot to mention. When we look at what's happening with the drugs, and everyone centers themselves about this epidemic that we have, but how are people supporting themselves with this? I talked about my days in undercover work, and I can tell you, they don't have jobs, most of them. They're out stealing, and they're supporting their habits on our expense. So when we look at what other crimes that are burdening law enforcement, think about the thefts that are occurring, think about home burglaries, think about robberies, think about all the other crimes. Drugs and violent crime and other crime go hand in hand. I've seen that for the last 27 years, and I'm still seeing it today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I spoke to a mom and dad really recently who lost their son to an overdose on illicit fentanyl. They had an idea maybe their son was smoking pot. The pot was laced with fentanyl. Their son died. And they said to me, Bryan, what should we have known? What should we have known? What clues did we miss? And so many moms and dads are out there tonight asking that question about their young child that's in their house. And I'd love to go around and I'll open this up to anybody here who's got an answer or a comment on that. What should moms and dads know tonight that might help protect the life of their son or daughter? Trisha, I don't know if you're raising your hand or not, but we can.
Yeah, I can only speak for Racine County, but I can tell you that we give great praise and thanks to Jonathan Delagrave for expanding our behavioral health services that are provided to the residents of Racine County. You can call 24 hours a day to get help if you have a son or daughter who needs help coming to grips with their addiction. We provide a complete plethora of services right up until the only thing we are not able to provide at this time, and I'm certain that people are considering this at the Human Services Department, is inpatient treatment. So we do the best we can. We're in our jail trying to provide people with medical methods for which to withdraw. We're in the jail providing Vivitrol shots for people who are addicted to opiates to help them when they are released from jail and back in the environment that they're living in. One thing I tell everyone who's in drug treatment court is that it may mean a complete change to your lifestyle. It may mean that your friends can no longer be your friends if they're using. For some people, it means that you can't be around family who are using. So be sure you provide that safe environment for your son or daughter to be in, to assist them in the withdrawal process and the recovery process. They're going to need that support because the things they're used to doing every day are just going to have to change. So those are the things that I would tell a parent, and I get those questions frequently. Where do I go? Who do I turn to? In Racine County, you can turn to the county and keep your kids close. Keep them with you. Keep them away from that bad influence that led them to a point where they're in the position that they're in right now.
Thank you very much, District Attorney Hanson.
I would just add one last thing to the DA's point here is a red flag is a red flag. And if you're a parent and you think you may see a red flag, but you don't necessarily think it might be in the best interest to act on it for your children, it might be a peer pressure issue or whatnot, a red flag is a red flag. Contact your healthcare provider or contact Racine County. We'll check it out, we'll collaborate with the parents, but do not fail to act on your intuition. A red flag is a red flag.
Anyone else, or I'll jump to another question. All right, let me jump. We've talked about the importance, in my belief, that we need to schedule fentanyl-related substances as a Schedule I drug. As of now, under federal law, that scheduling will expire on March 11th. How would that impact your ability to save lives in Wisconsin if it was no longer a Schedule I drug?
Well, from the prosecution perspective, we are going to be letting people go who are trafficking fentanyl in our community. I won't be able to hold them. And that to me is absolutely critical to stopping the flow. We are in a unique geographical position between Milwaukee and Chicago. We have a huge influx from Waukegan. If I can't stop that, when Deputy Ortiz is out on the road and he has to let someone go, that person will pass on the drugs they have with them and endanger the lives of everyone they come in contact with.
Thank you very much. Deputy Director?
Sure, I'll just add on, give it a larger perspective. Again, I have a bit of a unique perspective since we do oversee and fund a number of drug task forces around the state. There isn't one of the task forces that we interact with that does not deal with fentanyl or fentanyl-related substances on a daily basis. So it goes without saying, if the tool of actually having the analogs, the whack-a-mole type going from one drug, one substance to another, is not there for them to go to their DA, to go to their assistant U.S. attorney. Their job is unable to be accomplished. And one thing we're seeing across the board, and to put this all in summary with the traffickers, trafficking is greed. The people that are selling these substances are in it for one reason. They're in it to make money, sometimes to take care of their own addiction at the lower level, but really to make money. So what we see are these poly drug traffickers that one day will sell methamphetamine, one day sell marijuana, one day sell cocaine. It used to be a niche. Everybody had their own avenue. But because the synthetic opioids, the fentanyls, are so prevalent, everybody's dealing it. Our 12 drug task forces, some which focus specifically on opioids, other ones methamphetamine. Each one is working an opioid-related case. So without legislation, without the tool in their toolbox to go to their prosecutors, their job is unable to be accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As we've noted here today, opioids are the leading cause of death in Wisconsin for people 18 to 45. More than COVID, more than car accidents. It's the leading cause of death for individuals 18 to 45. We have a crisis on our hands. What are the resources that each of your respective agency needs to be able to address this crisis?
As I mentioned earlier, we talk about resources, we talk about education. I think that doing things that we are doing just today, I talked about the Opioid Summits that we're committed to doing, working very closely with our partners in the healthcare industry as well. Law enforcement resources, again, to have 65 deaths last year, and I know we have some active lead bias investigations, but those resources are tight, and trying to commit investigators to follow through with very protracted investigations, ultimately to get to the prosecutor, who also is going to need assistance with hiring prosecutors to make certain that these are followed through with in court. All for the while, because we work for the victims. And to the Congressman's point, he met with a family recently whose loved one passed away, a child passed away, and my heart goes out to that family. But it's far too often these are the things that we're hearing about. And if we don't have proper legislation in place, as graphic as it sounds, we're going to be hearing more and more stories that the Congressman shared. We're all going to be attending more funerals, because that is what exactly will happen. This drug is dangerous. As you can see by that illustration behind us, it doesn't take much. It was my understanding, and I'm sure my partners in the Border Patrol could talk about the amount of fentanyl that was confiscated last year alone was enough to provide a lethal dose to every American in this country. That is staggering, and that should shock everybody in this room and everyone listening to that. If we don't think we have a problem with that, then we have another thing coming. We're going to be going to funerals.
Congressman, we just had about one or two more questions.
Anybody else want to comment on the resources that they need?
Well, part of CBP's strategic goals are produce actionable intelligence and target the actual supply chains. So forward operating labs with scientists deployed at our ports of entry actually help us stem the flow of fentanyl and other narcotics. It is a critical tool for CBP and our partner agencies, such as Homeland Security investigations, to support controlled deliveries that could potentially lead to arrest and shut down dealers and their networks. And so these labs also help us discover these different analogs, exposing efforts that criminal organizations undertake to alter chemical makeups and evade enforcement. Some of the other things is collaborating with other intelligence organizations, supporting our National Targeting Center to share intelligence, to identify counter transnational criminal organizations, networks that are in the United States and outside the country. These supply chains are basically the key to actually being successful at actually taking these narcotics out of our communities and preventing them from coming into the United States.
Really, really appreciate those comments. I know we're coming tight on time. Let me wrap it up with this. I know some of our panelists need to step out. You can hear the work that's ahead of us. And so a handful of us I know have to get immediately back to work. Some of us will stay in case the media has questions with us today. But let me say to all of you at the panel, thanks for what you're doing. We have so many moms and dads who've lost a son or daughter because of fentanyl. And what I'm hearing today is that there's at minimum 3 key things that we need to do. 1, we need to secure our border so these drugs are not entering into the United States of America. 2, we need to fund our law enforcement officers so that our law enforcement agencies at the federal and at the local level have the resources that they need to be able to end this fentanyl crisis. And 3, we need to permanently schedule fentanyl-related substances as a Schedule 1 drug. So I'm going to say thank you to all of you who are here today. I know everyone has incredibly busy schedules. A few people are going to step out, and at that point, then we'll pause for a moment, and then we'll open it up to questions from our friends in the media. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let our friends in the federal government get back to work. But in a serious sense, you can see the work that's ahead of them. We'll open it. We'll start here. Mr. Roden.
I kind of a two-pronged question. This will probably primarily for you, Mr. Steil. First off, do you think that immigration reform, insofar as being able to get more people across the border legally who want to come here, rather than having to wait years and years and years south of the border, may be able to disempower the cartels that are trafficking both humans and drugs across the border, primarily at the southern border, of course?
I think it's imperative that we secure the southern border. We have a broken legal immigration system. We have a broken illegal immigration system. Absolutely imperative we address our illegal immigration system. I've been to the U.S.-Mexico border. I've seen how porous it is. I have seen individuals come across. I've spoken with the men and women of Border Protection about the importance of securing our southern border. I think that is absolutely step 1.
Do you think there's a better way to, you said fix the broken legal immigration system on top of, again, you've been very with the legal immigration system. What about legal immigration?
I think great question. I think step 1 is the need to secure the southern border. We need to fix our broken illegal immigration system. That will give us the opportunity to fix our legal immigration system.
And this is I'll be honest with you, I hadn't heard about the battle over keeping fentanyl schedule until you brought it up, I think it was a week or so ago. I saw you talking about it. Is there pretty much everyone agrees fentanyl is a really terrible thing, other than people making money off of it. Is there opposition to keeping it?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Great question. There's unquestionably opposition. These mics like to shut off on me. There's unquestionably opposition from some on the far left to scheduling this as a Schedule 1 drug. A Schedule 1 drug has minimum mandatory sentences. It's the real deal if you are accused and convicted of engaging in the illegal sale of a federal Schedule 1 drug. Appropriately so. It's incredibly dangerous. 2 milligrams is enough to kill an individual. To me, it's absolutely appropriate to be a Schedule 1 drug, and the punishment should appropriately meet the severity of the crime. There are those that don't believe that it should be a Schedule 1 drug, which is why Congress continues to kick the can down the road. I spoke on the House floor and said very specifically, Speaker Pelosi should bring the HALT Act to a vote on the House floor immediately. That would make fentanyl-related substances a Schedule 1 drug. That will help our men and women of law enforcement protect lives, and it'll put bad people in jail. And the fact that you will not bring that bill to a vote speaks volumes.
And the final question before I let everyone else take over. You said, so it could be act of Congress, both houses obviously, or could it be an executive order, or does it have to be an act of Congress?
The temporary, this is going to get in the weeds, I can get you chapter and verse on this. The temporary scheduling of fentanyl-related substances can be done under current law. The permanent scheduling requires an act of Congress. But that temporary process has now been ongoing, and it's reaching its expiration, which will require an act of Congress now to make it permanent. The HALT Act is the solution that I support.
Thank you, Brian.
So you wrote the president on this yesterday. What action could he take right now? Because you said you asked him to support this, but I mean, is it pretty much just cheerleading and getting Democrats on board?
So over 100 Republican members of Congress joined my letter to President Biden. He holds the bully pulpit. Speaker Pelosi refuses to bring this bill to a vote. I think you heard here today from our law enforcement friends, it's essential in their fight against fentanyl-related overdose deaths. Speaker Pelosi has chosen not to bring this to a vote on the House floor. I spoke on the House floor just directly requesting Speaker Pelosi to bring it to a vote. She has chosen not to do that. Now, over 100 members of Congress, my colleagues, joined me in a letter that I wrote to President Biden calling on this. We're trying to raise awareness to the American people of how dangerous this drug is. And if on March 11th, it is no longer a Schedule I drug, it will be very difficult for our local law enforcement agencies to enforce the current law, because it won't be the current law. It'll be very difficult for them to enforce the trafficking of fentanyl-related substances, and there will be the loss of lives, and there'll be moms and dads asking the question, why did Congress not act? I'm raising the awareness today because it expires on March 11th.
Any other questions from the media?
We must have covered it all flawlessly. Really appreciate all of our friends in the media being here, appreciate all of our panelists, and we'll wrap it up. Thank you very much.